All right. Hey, everyone out there, especially those of you gearing up for the UPSC exams.
Yes, hello.
This one's for you international relations folks.
We're going deep today.
We're diving into some classic political theory that might just give you an edge.
Might help you think differently, too, about the world today.
We're tackling Aristotle's Polity. I bet some of you are thinking, ancient Greek philosophy. Seriously.
What's that got to do with the UPSC exam, let alone international relations in the 21st century?
Right. But stick with us. Aristotle's ideas about the ideal state, about power, they can actually be surprisingly insightful for understanding how countries get along, or don't, on the global stage.
It's all connected, you see, the big picture.
To help us break it all down, I've got a brilliant mind here with me.
Happy to be here.
So, Aristotle was living in ancient Greece, right? A world of city-states, always competing, trying out different governments. He saw firsthand what worked, what didn't.
He saw the good and the bad of both democracy and oligarchy.
And those are the two big ones he really focused on, right? Democracy, often ruled by the poor.
Versus oligarchy, where the rich have all the power.
And what did Aristotle see as the root problems with these systems? Because he definitely wasn't a fan of either one in their pure form.
Well, he didn't just criticize, he tried to really understand why those systems were so messy, why they fell apart.
And what did he figure out?
Both had the same basic problem. They were extremes, too far in one direction.
Okay, I can see that.
Democracies can be ruled by passion, by the mood of the crowd, leading to rash decisions.
Mob rule, basically.
Exactly. While oligarchies, well, they just end up serving the interests of a tiny elite.
Ignoring everyone else.
And it's this imbalance, Aristotle realized, that causes chaos and conflict.
So if both extremes are bad, what's the alternative? This is where polity comes in.
Right. Aristotle's big idea. You need a middle ground, a balance point, a system that avoids going too far in either direction.
Makes sense.
And the foundation of this ideal state, he thought, a strong, vibrant middle class.
The middle class. I know that term gets thrown around a lot, but
Yeah.
I'm guessing Aristotle had a very specific idea of why they were so important.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just about economics for him. Aristotle believed the middle class had a certain temperament. They weren't super rich, so they weren't consumed by greed.
Right.
But they also weren't desperately poor, constantly struggling to survive.
So they weren't driven to extremes in either direction.
Exactly. This made them the most stable part of society, in Aristotle's view.
Like a political shock absorber. Keeping things from getting too crazy.
Perfect analogy. And you know, that idea, that a strong middle class makes for a stable society. You'll find it popping up again and again in political theory, all the way to modern times.
It's amazing how much these ancient ideas still resonate today. So we've got this middle class, the foundation of Aristotle's polity. But how did he see this actually working in practice? Was it just a simple majority rule system?
Not quite. Aristotle actually thought pure democracy was just as bad as pure oligarchy. Remember, he was all about balance.
So what did he propose instead?
He called it a mixed constitution, a blend of democracy, oligarchy, even a dash of aristocracy.
Okay, so it almost seems to mix it all up. But what would that look like in practice?
Different groups would get a say, but no one group could completely dominate. Some aspects of democracy where citizens could participate, but also some elements of oligarchy giving some weight to the wealthy and powerful.
To keep them from feeling completely ignored and causing trouble.
Exactly. And he also saw a role for what he called aristocracy. Now, he didn't mean just people with inherited titles and wealth.
You meant people with what? Like the best character.
Yeah.
The most capable.
Right. The most virtuous people. It's like he was anticipating the idea of checks and balances that we see in modern democracies.
So basically the key to stability is to balance everyone's interests, to prevent any one group from taking over completely.
Exactly. And to make sure things stayed fair and to prevent tyranny, Aristotle also put a huge emphasis on the rule of law.
Everyone treated equally under the law.
Regardless of their wealth or status. A radical idea for his time, and still a cornerstone of many legal systems today. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're ready for more Aristotle because we're about to get into some really interesting stuff.
I know I'm ready. It's amazing, how relevant these ideas still feel today.
That's the beauty of political theory.
It's not just dusty old books, right?
It's about these fundamental questions, about how we organize ourselves as humans. Those questions never really go away.
Okay, so speaking of questions, and maybe a bit of controversy, I think we need to talk about Aristotle's concept of citizenship.
Yes. Not his most forward-thinking idea, to be honest.
To say the least. I mean, as much as I'm enjoying this exploration of polity, his definition of who actually got to be a citizen was pretty limited.
Very limited, and this is a good reminder that even the greatest thinkers of the past had blind spots.
We can't just take everything Aristotle said and apply it directly to the modern world.
Exactly. Times change, values change, and when it comes to things like universal human rights, political participation, we've come a long way.
Okay, so let's try to understand Aristotle in his own context for a moment.
Yeah.
Why did he believe that only certain groups were capable of being citizens?
Well, for Aristotle, being a citizen wasn't just about living in a certain place, it was about actively participating in government.
Being involved in the political life of the state.
Right, and he argued that to do that properly, to really dedicate yourself to the affairs of the state, you needed one thing above all else: leisure time.
So people who had to work to survive just didn't have the time or energy to be good citizens.
And this is thinking, yeah. And this brings us back to the middle class. Remember, Aristotle saw them as not just financially comfortable, but also having that freedom from constant work, that time to be politically active.
Ah, I see the connection. So for Aristotle, political participation was almost like a privilege, something you could only really do if you had a certain level of economic security.
That's a good way to put it. And of course, we wouldn't accept those limitations today. But it does make you think about how we can make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate in politics, regardless of their income or how much they work.
That's a huge challenge for modern democracies, right?
It definitely is. But even if we reject some of Aristotle's conclusions, I think he's onto something with that basic idea, that for a democracy to work, people need to have the time and capacity to be involved.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What do you think Aristotle would make of our modern democracies, with their complex systems, mass media, all the challenges of getting people engaged?
It's a fascinating question. He'd probably be overwhelmed, to be honest. But even though the world is vastly different now, I think some of his core ideas still hold up.
Like those principles of balance, moderation, the rule of law, they're pretty universal, aren't they?
And I think they're especially relevant for those of you studying international relations. Think about it. For there to be peace and cooperation between countries, you kind of need those same things within countries, right?
So a country that's internally stable, that's governed fairly, it's going to be a better global citizen.
Makes sense, doesn't it? If we look at the big picture, at the things that matter most in international relations, peace, security, cooperation, well, a system like Aristotle's Polity, with all its emphasis on balance and law, it could actually contribute to a more stable and just world.
That's a really powerful thought. So even though Aristotle was writing thousands of years ago, he's still giving us valuable insights into the world today.
It just goes to show you can always learn from the past.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We've been deep in the world of Aristotle's Polity
Try to figure out what this ancient Greek philosopher has to say about good government.
and what it means for us today. Now, for our UPSC folks out there, especially those of you focused on international relations.
I bet you're wondering, where can we actually see these ideas in action?
Right. Are there any modern countries that resemble Aristotle's Polity? Can we learn from them?
Those are great questions. It's tempting to think of these ancient ideas as, well, ancient.
Like they belong in a museum.
Exactly. But I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about international relations.
The past can teach us a lot about the present. Right?
Absolutely. Of course, we have to remember the world has changed a lot since Aristotle's time.
No more city-states.
And our ideas about citizenship, about political participation, they've evolved too.
So we're not going to find a perfect copy of Polity anywhere.
Not exactly. But there are modern states that embody some of those core principles.
Oh, really? Give us some examples.
Well, think about one of Aristotle's big ideas, a strong middle class as the key to stability. A lot of modern democracies have that.
Like who comes to mind?
Look at the Scandinavian countries. Sweden, Denmark, Norway.
Ah, interesting. I see where you're going with this.
They've got those strong social safety nets, low income inequality. People have a real stake in the system.
Sounds a lot like what Aristotle was talking about.
It does, doesn't it? And that internal stability, it plays out on the global stage too. Scandinavian countries are known for being peaceful, cooperative, they're reliable partners in the international system.
So their internal strength translates into a more stable world order.
Exactly. Now, another principle of polity, remember that mixed constitution, blending different forms of government.
To prevent any one group from getting too powerful.
Right. We see that in some modern systems too. One interesting example, Switzerland.
Oh, wow. Switzerland. They're unique, aren't they?
They have this really fascinating system. direct democracy, representative democracy, even a bit of what Aristotle might call aristocracy with their council of experts.
And they have those cantons, right? Those regional governments.
Lots of power at the local level. Plus, the Swiss love their referendums. Citizens get to vote directly on all sorts of issues.
So it's a very deliberate attempt to balance power, to prevent any one group from taking over, just like Aristotle said.
And it seems to be working. Switzerland is stable, prosperous, and they stay neutral in international affairs.
So we might not find a perfect embodiment of polity running around today.
True, but we see those principles popping up in different ways.
And for our international relations students, that's a key takeaway. These ancient ideas, they can still help us make sense of the world.
Understanding Aristotle helps you understand the challenges of government, the need for balance, its timeless wisdom.
Polity might not be a blueprint for the 21st century, but it gives us a really valuable framework for thinking about how to build good societies.
Societies that are stable, just, and that can contribute to a more peaceful world.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today.
From ancient Greece to the modern world.
Huge thanks to our expert for guiding us through it all.
My pleasure. Always enjoy a good philosophical discussion.
Now, everyone listening, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the deep dive for more fascinating explorations.
Keep learning, keep questioning.
Until next time.